I'm Emma Vosti and this is See Opportunity, a business series proudly presented by the City of Stonington. A series where each week I sit down with some of the masterminds behind Australia's brightest brands. Welcome back to See Opportunity, a business series proudly presented by the City of Stonington. My name's Emma Vosti. I've loved being your host for this business series. We've caught up with so many different business owners in the City of Stonington from all different industries. And if you know the City of Stonington, you know that it is home to some of the most luxurious properties. And if we're talking about amazing properties, well, we have to talk about WHITEFOX. Marty Fox joins me from WHITEFOX Real Estate, which is really shaken up the game, almost flipped it on its head when you came into the market in 2017. What made you kind of take the approach that you took? And if people don't know WHITEFOX, can you tell us what sets you guys apart?
Yeah, I think when we started in 2017, it came from a pretty solid background running agency in the more traditional sense.
Yeah.
So I did have 3 other offices prior to WHITEFOX with partners of the older ilk, and they taught me some of their tricks of the trade. And the dream was to always, and I actually wrote down WHITEFOX when I was 21. So I'm now turning 33. So I've had the idea for a long time. And it was just about cutting my teeth, really understanding the people, the processes internally and externally, and to build an agency that actually brought a lot of personality and lifestyle to the transaction. And I felt that in the luxury sector of the market, that's what was lacking. So essentially I just looked at every business and they weren't doing anything necessarily wrong, but they weren't doing anything different. So they were all auction prone, all heavily involved in print media. They all were suit and tie and pretty rigid, and there was just no social media, there was no video content. And I just thought to myself, how can, like, a home is so emotional and there's so much personality within these homes because they're people, it's their life. And if we did great social media, great video content, brought the personality of the agents and the house through that type of platform, it would be successful. More private negotiations that are a little bit more intimate. It just all worked. And I think the timing was right for it, with obviously social media going through the roof and that actually now becoming just media. So I've always, well, now I see social media as it's just media. It's not social.
It's just another medium.
It's just another media platform. So that was the guts of it. The timing was right. The people were perfect. My age, you know, it was just, it all really was a beautiful recipe.
If people haven't seen your ads, often you're scrolling and you see everyone's got colour photos, and then your first photo will always be in black and white. Just one of the examples of the point of difference that's like, oh, hang on.
Yeah,
what's going on
so
here?
the whole thing is it's not one or two things. It's like a combination of maybe 20 or 30 things that are just slightly different that make, I believe, our properties stand out or our staff stand out. So we're always looking at that for that slight outlier. And, you know, like the black and white photography is like the social media, like the sold boards that go on a property after it's been sold. We write really creative copy.
Who comes up with those? Are you going to take credit for them?
No,
is that a team effort?
No, it's a team effort, but it is run by my business partner, Aidan Hathaway, which is another business that was born out of the success of WHITEFOX Real Estate. So he is a genius copywriter and creative mind, and we've probably delivered over 400 boards and not one's ever been the same. So it's a big talking point. People love looking out for what the boards say, and they're cheeky, you know.
Why can't you have fun in real estate? Why has that stigma been around?
I think it's been around because if you think of real estate, it is quite serious, but there's also a lot of people that are in real estate that aren't actually that serious. It's a pretty low barrier to entry. As long as you can breathe and put a suit on, you tend to get a job, which also annoys me a little bit. I think they should actually make it harder to transact at that type of level, but that's another discussion. I just think, it was just one of those things that if we brought a bit of creativity to real estate, which there's so many assets to talk about, everything's so different, it would be engaging, and we've proven that real estate can be really engaging.
I love that. It's funny because a lot of the time in the real estate industry, you'll compare real estates to real estates, but when I think about WHITEFOX, I more put you in a category like, I was speaking to Christian Klein from Mr. Miyagi the other day, and they have a very cheeky marketing approach too, or Koala. I put you in the realm of other clever marketers as opposed to other agencies. Is that a compliment to you?
Massive. I mean, I've always viewed White Fox as a creative agency that happens to deal in property.
Yeah.
And we've proven that now with the creation of White Fox Marketing, whereby we are doing the same thing for other agents in other states. We're doing it for developers and building their branding for their development. We're doing it for an ice cream company tomorrow, and you know,
that must have its perks.
It's pretty good, and it's one of our girls' birthdays tomorrow, so it's the perfect timing. But it's it all relates back to your tone, what your personality is, what your brand pillars are, and we've just been so consistent with our messaging that when you do it for 3 years really well, it feels like you're 10 years in.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the scary part, where people are surprised that it's only been 3 and a bit years and what we've been able to do in that amount of time. But it stems back to consistency, and it's the copy. Like, great copywriting can sort of set your business free.
What are your business pillars?
So we're very bold, polished, and matter of fact. So we're very bold in our communication, how we get about, who we hire, the properties that we take on. We take a lot of risk in sometimes some really outlandish type properties, but if they get moved, then you obviously get the accolade. We're very bold, but on the same hand, we're also very polished. So we won't do anything without a lot of consideration. And we're very matter of fact. We're sometimes so blunt that it's kind of refreshing, because then you don't get pissed around by people.
Yeah.
So if people want to work with us, amazing. But if they don't, we don't try and push too hard. Like, it is what it is. If you want traditional, that's fine. You'll be successful. If you want something a little bit different, well, even better. So bold, polished, and matter of fact.
Tell me about the City of Stonington is very unique, and some of the properties that are there are very unique. What do you think sets it apart?
The City of Stonington is very special for me in particular. As a business, we don't just operate in Stonington.
Yeah.
We've got 2 offices, one in South Melbourne and one in Stonington. But we operate everywhere, all the way from the Peninsula up to Harkway, back to Mount Macedon. So it's about the property and the people that we're dealing with, which dictates where we go.
Yeah.
So it's very organic, which makes it hard to prospect. Like, we don't prospect. We find business when business comes to us, and then we execute. So I'll give you an example. If somebody calls and says, I'd like an appraisal or this or that, it's not our thing. If you're ready to sell now, we'll offer you a strategy. But if you want valuations, you can call another agent or call the bank. Like, it's
Matter of fact.
very matter of fact. But Stonington's special because as a hub, you can either be based in the city or you can be based in a little village that has the ability to float in and out of other suburbs. And for us, our HQ at South Melbourne worked really well. But for me, growing up in Stonington, I went to a lot of schools in Stonington. I went to Christchurch Grammar, Geelong Grammar, Armidale Primary and Toorak Primary. So I really got about. I was a naughty kid. So
Get around.
I really got around. And Dad had hair salons in Ackland, in Chapel Street. And so for me, like, going into work in South Melbourne, it didn't feel like home. And opening the office in Stonington for us, I thought, was a really good move, because it brought me back to where I grew up. And from Stonington, it's one of those municipalities where everyone will go there for some particular reason, whether it be a night out or a great meal, or they met their partner on a crazy Saturday night. It's just, there's something special about Stonington.
I don't know what you're talking about, Marty.
Well, I did.
Me
So for us, having Stonington as our base made perfect sense. Felt right.
What is it about that area? Like, is it the culture? Is it the restaurants? Is it just, because for a busy place, like being a resident of Stonington, I love where I live, but there's also a real heart to it. And there's so many variation in the properties that you walk past in one street.
Look, I think Stonington was blessed with the fact that it had Chapel Street. Chapel Street, I remember the day when there was Chapel Street Festival and it was like a nightclub, a day club. I was just a little kid and I just watched my parents. I had young parents. They had me when they were 19 and 21. So they were kids of Stonington and I became a kid of Stonington. And I think Chapel Street was that real heartbeat. And then you saw the area transition from Toorak Road, and when Johnny Rockets used to be there in the Fun Factory and the rollerblading ring, and all your birthdays would be there. And then it gentrified, and as you got towards Windsor, it started turning into a real culinary sort of heartbeat of Melbourne, not just Stonington. So I think it's just gone through these waves, and you'll see it sort of come back and forth, and it goes through transitions where, you know, top end of Toorak Road now is pumping with great restaurants, Bar Carolina, you've got your stables of Francois. So when you think about it, it's when do people have the most amount of fun? They have fun when they're eating and when they're with their friends. So that's nights out and dinners out. So that's what's special about Stonington. I think when you've got those connotations to fun, to work there is just a blessing.
Obviously, we were supposed to all be together doing this event live. Things change and we've decided to be agile and to mix it up. I know you operate, though, a lot online anyway as a business. So I was hoping to just get your insight into how you were kind of already prepared for the changes that hit the real estate industry, and how as a business you kind of were ready to act quickly because of the business pillars that you already operate under.
It's a good question. I think there's two components. There's like mechanics, whether or not you can actually survive and prosper, and then mindset. So from us, there was zero panic, and I think that does stem back to the mechanics of our business. You know, in 2017, 18, 19, everybody, like from the very first outset, everybody was doing auctions. The market had a bit of a dip, and it went from an auction clearance rate of 85% down to about 40%. And that's when we cancelled auctions. So about halfway through 2017, we said no more auctions, more personalised, private negotiations, and the real aim for that was actually survival as a new business. If we can sell properties quicker and not have to wait 4 weeks, well, you increase revenue and in a shorter amount of time. So everybody sort of won. So we just went straight back to that mindset at the drop of the hat, because we brought auctions back in 2020, and we just said, hey, this is actually no different. For 2.5 years, we smashed it out doing private negotiations. Now everybody has to learn the art of the deal, because in my opinion, it actually is pretty easy taking names and numbers for a month and waiting for an auctioneer to come in and call an auction. Very little skill. There's a lot of skill though in having to close a buyer and convince them of a pricing in a private scenario.
Yeah.
So
does
for
it
us,
weed out buyers that aren't really
it weeded out
interested
buyers.
as well?
Yeah, you're dealing with a smaller amount of people that are a little bit more serious, because in a private negotiation, the price has to be set a little bit higher, as opposed to an auction where it's a little bit more enticing and a bit lower. So our mechanics were good going into COVID, and I felt a lot of people go pretty quiet, and I thought this was an opportunity to step up during a time of, you know, uncertainty. And what we did during COVID was pretty powerful. We filmed videos on each staff member and put their story out into the public sort of domain. It wasn't a business that was all Marty, it was all these other great people across the business that sort of came to the limelight.
Yeah.
And then we did a bit of a sort of support package type thing for our existing clients, because they banned opens, they banned this, they banned that. We invented the room by room tour. So like really detailed walkthroughs of every property that was on the market that we funded for the client. So we called them and said, look, I know that it's really hard, but we're going to film your property like to a T. Might take 15, 20 minutes. They'll be really detailed videos, and that will give the buyer the ability to really look at this asset online to get a feel for what they want to do. Then I came out with a criteria set for buyers. So if you wanted to look at a WHITEFOX property, you had to confirm that you had watched the room by room tour, you had done a drive-by and you were satisfied with the location, and you can prove that you're financially ready. That weeded out so many people. And then the industry, the REIV, Real Estate Institute of Victoria, took those criteria and made it a recommendation for agents across Victoria. So yeah, it was pretty good.
Your clients must have been happy with that kind of confident approach, because a lot of the time when there are times of uncertainty, that breeds more uncertainty. So I imagine your confidence would have been just quite effective.
When something bad happens, you look for either an answer or you look for just someone that's leading that says it's going to be all right, this is what we're going to do. And sometimes a plan is better than no plan.
Yeah.
And even if the plan wasn't to come to fruition, at least it was something. It was a belief system. And what it did for the staff as well was just incredible, because they had to hone their video skills, their presenting skills, their thinking on the feet. And because the owners sometimes wouldn't leave the house, they were doing it with the pressure of the owner standing there watching them from behind the scenes. So you know, like what you're probably experiencing on the day, they just had to do, and it was
which can be really intimidating.
It's daunting, you know. I don't mind talking on the camera, as you can see, but I stepped back and I didn't film one of those tours. So everybody stepped up, and I think through COVID, we just got stronger, or it solidified the decisions that we made in 2017 as the right ones for when this sort of hit.
What have you learned about your team?
What I've learned about the team, it was funny. So on Wednesday last week, we knew that we would be catching up this week as a solid unit again. You know, we hit the blinds up and we all got together. And my wife and I sat down at home and we wrote a letter individually to every single staff member, blisters on the little finger. And we delivered that to them yesterday. And they read it out, they read it to themselves before the meeting commenced. And it was a really good way for us to thank them for what they did during that time. And it was really special. So I think what COVID did for us is it gave us the ability to reflect. And our lives were moving pretty quick. Couple kids, growing business, money coming in, money going out, expansion, this and that. Sometimes you need to just stop, smell the roses, realise how lucky you are, and that at the end of the day, when things can get stripped from you, it's actually the ones that are there, still supporting, that mean the most. And for us, we were lucky that, you know, that was our staff. We were lucky enough to not lay anybody off. I, as a director, and Aidan in WHITEFOX Marketing, we put a hold to our incomes so that we kept everybody on board. And I think through doing that, we actually didn't have any effects to the business, but we were prepared for it. So I think it just brought everyone a little bit closer together. And it did recalibrate a few people, you know, in the industry, which is needed.
You're obviously seen as a leader in this space, whether you like it or not, whether you call yourself that or not. What would your kind of reassurance, because I think, to be honest, a lot of people right now are looking for reassurance, and they are looking to people from different industries wanting to know your view and your forecast. What would you say to people that are nervous about an asset that they are currently holding, that they're nervous whether they're going to have to sell it or not?
It's a really hard question to answer, because a lot of people ask me, oh, what's the market doing? Like, I've got an okay read.
I didn't ask you that. Did you notice
that? No, but it's a similar question. Like, you know, what should people be doing? Like, everyone. That's why I love residential real estate. There's so many different factors that tie into why somebody needs to sell or buy: birth, death, marriage, relocation, financial gain, financial loss. 6 reasons. There isn't a 7th. Doesn't exist. There's those combinations, but within those combinations, there's pressure. And that pressure is something that as an agent you need to be able to mitigate and give the right advice to. So, you know, if you're in a position where you can hold your asset during this time, great. But if you're a person that has to sell, there's actually limited stock on the market, so great. So there's a positive spin on any situation, depending what sector you're in and what situation you happen to be standing in. So, you know, we advise each individual as per their situation. So, very hard to give an overall vibe, but in terms of leadership and other agents or other businesses, it's just about looking at the positives in it, you know, how to adapt to the current situation. Because you can bury your head in the sand, or you can lift your head up and look around for opportunity. And there is, unfortunately, opportunity in negative situations.
Yeah. What opportunities have you identified as a business for WHITEFOX?
We've identified the ability to gain goodwill. Goodwill is, I think, an extremely valuable asset to hold. You can't actually put a dollar value on goodwill, and we built goodwill with our staff by supporting them. We built goodwill with our clients by covering the expense of filming all of their videos and being a thought leader with the process of being able to go into their homes during a worldwide pandemic. And goodwill in the fact that even though we're 3 and a bit years old, I believe we actually are the leaders of this industry. How we operate is how the future agent will operate in 15, 20 years to come. And I think that they'll see us as that pioneering company.
I love what you said there, and sometimes it's easier for businesses to do that, easier said than done. How do you stay in your lane and not fall into the trap of comparing yourself to other businesses. How have you managed to do that?
Did you watch my post this morning?
No.
I did a post today about people who compare other people to other people. And
What did it say? Tell me.
It essentially just said, you know, people making comparisons to what we do, or particularly what I do. But I'm running my own race. You know, not only am I listing and selling the individual assets, I'm building 2 separate companies, raising 2 little kids that I'm very hands-on with, and trying to expand something into a totally different realm. And if you're making comparisons with me to another agent, it's the wrong comparison. If you can find another 29-year-old that's been able to do that and be successful against these much bigger agencies, then compare. But I wouldn't even see it as a competitor. I'd actually see them as a colleague, someone that I can share tips with, befriend, like help them with their journey. They could help me with my journey. So comparing, I think's a really bad trait to have, which is why we don't have, you know, any presence on Rate My Agent or, you know, review this or review that. We don't ask anybody to do any of that, because if they're happy, they'll tell people. If they're not happy, well, they'll tell people. We don't need that gratification to be sitting with us.
Yeah.
We'll do what we do. If we can do a good job, amazing, and we aim to do a good job. But, you know, sometimes you do make little mistakes, but you need to learn from them. You know, Buddy Franklin can't win Player of the Day every friggin' match, but he'll give it his best shot, and that's what we do as a business.
Oh, I think Buddy Franklin could win Player of the Day every match.
Probably.
But, I mean, so could Patrick Cripps. But other Blues fans out there will agree with me. Who do you go for?
Doggies.
Okay, that's all right.
I had my moment.
You had your moment. You're done. Let the Blues win one. We were building. Jeez,
I had
building
that
up to
moment.
something great.
And it was one of the best moments. It was with my dad, who's a mad doggy supporter. And he's an interesting story because he starts in the business on the 1st of June.
Wow,
And
so you're employing your dad as of
My
the 1st
dad
of
starts
June.
on the 1st of June. And it's funny, we've hired a lot of people that have never been agents, because my theory with real estate, and if you look at some of the best agents, they never dreamt of being an agent. They didn't grow up aspiring to be a real estate agent. They fell into it. And my dad's been a hairdresser in Stonington since I was born, right? So he has stood on his feet for 30, 40 years, cutting hair, being a free psychologist to people, has a database of 10 to 12,000 people, and he broke his wrist in a motorbike accident last year. So he's never really been the same, and he's the most charismatic bloke that I know. And I said, Dad, why don't you just join? It's the same thing. You're talking to people. People love telling you, you know, their life stories. You cut their fringe. What's the difference between cutting a fringe and cutting a deal?
Are you ready for him to take,
I'm ready.
to take #1 salesman?
I hope so. But that's the thing, like, people love dealing with people, and I think that's a big sort of pillar as well of White Fox, that people deal with people. We're not in the property game, we're actually in the people game. The property is the byproduct.
Love it. What's the future hold for White Fox?
The future is an office based down in the Peninsula to service our clients down there, which we do a lot of out of the Hawksburn office. The growing of the rent department, which is a massive thing that agencies forget. So we're going to be bringing a lot more media into the rental side of things. So introducing a lot of content around rentals. I don't think
Great for the Stonington area.
Great for the Stonington area.
So many young people want to live there.
So many people, and that is a real asset of the company, and we build a lot of goodwill. But for me, you know, I've got this big dream of actually creating an international brand that is a privately owned company that does it really differently, but in various parts of the world. So we've got an office opening in New Zealand in the short to medium term, which will be very exciting. That'll act as a bit of a guinea pig after we've done the Peninsula.
Might be the only place we can travel to for a while.
I know.
So it's a perfect location.
I know, and the Peninsula. Property down the Peninsula on both sides will probably skyrocket in the coming years, because people probably work from home a little bit more, and they'll see the value in having that lifestyle that they've probably always wanted. But and then expansion internationally. Like I said, people are people, and we've got a real formula to what we do. And our boards and so forth would go so well in America. You know, the Americans are totally left of centre, so I think they'll appreciate the style. And there's other little things that I'm working on in the background that will separate us even further, but those developments will happen next year.
Okay, finish this sentence for me. We will find you drinking what coffee at what cafe in the city of Stonington?
I'll be having a strong 3/4 oat at either Little Hawk, or if Little Hawk isn't dishing it out, then I'll be going next door to the Italians and getting a long Mac.
I love it.
At Office Scene Zero.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us,
you.
Marty Fox of White Fox. We appreciate it and we wish you all the best. The empire's growing, I can feel it.
It's
and
fun.
We've loved having your insight and your knowledge. Thank you so much as well for watching See Opportunity, a business series proudly presented by the City of Stonington. If you want more information, head to stonington.vic.gov.au/business.